Why are you here?
I'm here to see Tulsi, a real politician that tells the truth. I mean, and you don't see that, and courageous for standing up against the DNC. When Bernie was running and she saw the corruption within the DNC, she stood up against it and against her very interests. She could have been a rising star within that established party, and she's not. That's not important to her. The American people are what's important to her. So that's what I saw. That was the first time I got attracted to Tulsi because of that courage that she showed, that she went against her own interest for the people of the United States, and that was huge. Very important. And we don't see that today.
Why are you interested in Tulsi?
Well, I like her positions on avoiding regime change wars. We seem to have an attraction to those, and she's speaking out against them.
Just this morning. Put your name and address or email, whatever you want to put down.
I'm supporting Tulsi because she has a tremendous perspective on world affairs, which is very vital for America as a global technology leader, economic leader, business leader, and also there is a huge element of military issues, which being a veteran herself, it makes a big difference. So she really has a deep depth of understanding of world affairs, and so I'm proud to support Tulsi Gabbard.
My name is Steve. I'm a teacher of Asian Studies, and I became involved with issues of war and peace as our countries and our world situation deteriorated over the last few years. And one thing led to another, and here I am today at a Tulsi Gabbard event. I was drawn to her because of her positions about war and peace and the dire need to engage in dialogue with other countries, whether we're friendly with them or not. And also the very important resources that are being taken away by our overblown military budget, our obscenely expensive military machine, so that we can use them for things that really are important, like global warming and making sure that the world is fed and clothed and the children are taken care of. So that's why I'm here today.
Why are you interested in Tulsi?
Well, I'm looking for a real candidate, someone who's actually solid, ethical and straightforward and intelligent, and so Tulsi's the only one that's standing out,
Well, yeah. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Wonderful to see you here. Welcome to this audience. We are so pleased you've shown up, and I'm so sorry we don't have enough chairs for you, but I think probably this is going to be happening all over the country, because what we're bringing and what you will be seeing and everybody will be knowing in the future is Tulsi, 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 and everybody's interested. So thanks again for coming. I want to introduce to you Steve Roddy, Professor Roddy.
So welcome. Aloha, everyone. I am the director of the Asian Studies program here at USF. And in that capacity, I was able to secure this room for our wonderful speaker today, an Asian American woman who's made an incredible impact on our country, and we're looking forward to hearing more from her. So I'll turn it right back to...
Sure. Great. I have been asked to reduce my remarks to very few, and so what I'd like to do is just simply tell you why I have been supporting Tulsi for the last 4 years. I didn't know this woman until she came across the screen in Congress. I looked at what I saw and I thought, wow, this is wonderful. And then I watched her for these low years, and all of a sudden, I found that she's coming to San Francisco. So I got to have an opportunity to help her bring her here. I'm very, very grateful for that. Why? Because I think that she is the only light in our darkness in this country. And we have to have someone like her who will come in with vision, with truth, with honesty, with power, with presence. I remember as a child, I do want to tell you this, I'm older than most of you in this audience, I'm 83, and I remember listening to a little tiny radio as we heard the voice of power and truth and honesty and vision. and it was FDR. And my father and mother listened as though he was a lifesaver. And then I got to see what can happen when a man like this is in office. Secondly, I saw the same thing and I felt the same thing when John Kennedy came to power. I worked for him as a volunteer. And here again, we had this unusual combination of creativity and brains and power and vision and truth. And of course, he was taken from us pretty quickly, but nonetheless, the visions were there. And then today we have Tulsi at this time, who's here with wonderful ideas and a vision that nobody else can match, and truth, and she's a living embodiment of everything that's good on the planet, and we are so fortunate to have her in our midst. And so with that, I would like to welcome Tulsi to the stage.
Start the day. Really, thank you all so much for making the time to come out here on this beautiful Saturday morning. Thank you, Sharon and Steve, for your kind words and introduction and helping to bring this all together. And I want to say thanks to the USF security team who are here on a Saturday morning. There they are. They're outside. They've been directing traffic and getting everyone in here. Give them a round of applause. It's tough sometimes when we see what is happening in our country and what...
Tulsi, could you stand up higher? People can't see you in the back.
Okay, you guys can't see me in the back?
No.
Is that better? All right. This is okay. Otherwise I'll be like a mile away from you guys back there. There are a lot of challenges that we're facing. And it's heartbreaking to see in so many different ways how we're being torn apart as people, how our country is being divided, how that vision that our founders had for us as a country, as a united country with a government of, by, and for the people has been lost. It is hard to see, and it's heartbreaking to see, how, because of that, people are suffering. Our family, our friends, our neighbors are dealing with things that we shouldn't have to be dealing with in this country. We're in a place where we have a government that is not of the people, by the people, and for the people, but rather a government that is controlled and influenced by self-serving politicians, greedy corporations, and those special interests who can afford to buy their seat at the table as laws are being made. And who pays the price? We do. Who suffers as a result? We do. Who is left behind? We are. The place that we are in as a country right now is exactly counter to the vision that our founders had for this great country, where we have leaders elected by the people who are of the people and for the people, and whose sole interest and focus is on serving the interests of the people of this country, putting the well-being of our people, our planet, and our future at the forefront of those decisions that are being made. Instead, what we see is what's happening in Washington, where we have people who live in a bubble that is so disconnected from the reality that we are living in our lives across this country. And this corruption of spirit that's casting a dark shadow over us is what we must defeat. And there's only one way to do that. And to me, this is why we're gathered here today, because we care. We care for each other. We care for our country. We care for our planet and our future. We want to do something about it, right? Yes. So you are why I am hopeful. Because gathering together in this spirit, the spirit of what we in Hawaii call aloha, is truly the answer of how we overcome the challenges that we face. Now, a lot of people know aloha is a word that means hello or goodbye, right? Because this is how we greet each other in Hawaii. But there's a reason why we start our conversations and our gatherings with this word aloha. Because there is so much power in what it actually means. That when we greet each other with aloha, when we gather in this spirit of aloha, what we're really saying is, I love you. I care for you. I respect you. And I recognize that we are all brothers and sisters. We are all children of God, regardless of where we come from, or the color of our skin, who we love, how much money we make or don't make, what kind of education we have. All of these things that are so often used to divide us, whether it's by politicians or corporations or people in positions of power who pit one group of us against the other for their own gain, who tear us apart, raising fear and suspicions and fomenting bigotry between us for their own gain without any care for the pain and the harm and the impact that it has on all of us. This aloha spirit is what has the power to defeat that darkness with that love and care for each other and that love for our country. It is this spirit of aloha that unites us, that reminds us and inspires us about how we can build that path forward, that path that leads us to a future that is bright, that is peaceful, that is prosperous, that provides that opportunity and justice and equality for every single one of us. As we look throughout history, especially during those darkest moments, and we see how we have found our way through, it has always been when we the people stand up, when we stand together, when we speak as one for what is right and what is just, and for each other. And it is this time that we are in now that calls upon us to once again rise up and stand together. Knowing that when we do that, when we stand together, motivated by this care for each other, this love for our country, there is no obstacle that we cannot overcome. The obstacles seem great, and this is why sometimes it's easy to feel disheartened and frustrated and see, how do we move forward? How can we ever overcome? Just a couple of weekends ago, in the days leading up to the anniversary of Bloody Sunday in Selma, Alabama, I had a chance to go and walk on a civil rights pilgrimage led by Congressman John Lewis, who was one of the youngest leaders of the civil rights movement at that time, and it was an incredible experience to hear directly from him as we walked through those steps, where he and Dr. King and so many others were beaten and bloodied, were called every name under the book, were threatened, their very lives on the line as they worked for justice. They worked for equality. They worked for the right to vote, to make sure that their voices were heard. And it was heart-wrenching to hear from him about what they went through, but so inspiring because of how they responded to that hatred and that darkness. How they responded to that physical violence that they endured. They did not respond to that hate with hate. As Dr. King said, they knew that darkness cannot drive out darkness, only light can do that. That hate cannot drive out hate, only love can do that. Their example And those wise words are what inspires us today and show us, that light that path forward for us on how we can bring about the real change that we need to see. How we can pass legislation like Medicare for All to make sure that every single person lighting that path forward, showing us how we, the people, can bring about real criminal justice reform. How we can pass legislation that I've introduced to end the federal prohibition on marijuana. All right! It will have an incredible impact on this country. In this press conference that we held as we were introducing this legislation, which is the only bipartisan piece of legislation to end the federal prohibition on marijuana in Congress, we had a few people there who shared their stories. We had small business owners and people who were working on providing medical marijuana to those who need it. We had researchers who were gathering evidence and data to say this is important to help impact people's lives. We had people who were helping those who are fighting opioid addiction and who were seeing every day how in places where medical marijuana is legal, opioid addiction is dropping. Opioid-related deaths are decreasing. And people who are going through very difficult problems are finally finding help. We also had a guy named Harry from Virginia who was there, who shared his own story about how when he was in college, about 10 years ago, studying computer science, furthering himself and seeking better opportunities, he was convicted of marijuana possession and thrown into prison for 10 years, 2 mandatory minimum sentences of 5 years each because of possession of marijuana. He talked about how his cellmate was convicted of murder and he got out of prison before Harry did. The injustice that exists within our country because of the failed war on drugs and our broken criminal justice system and who it's impacting has to end so that we don't have another generation of people whose lives are ruined and who we lose to this failed war on drugs. There are a lot of different issues that we need to address. I've mentioned a few of them. Dealing with the climate crisis that we're facing in this country and in the world is an urgent one that we all must stand up to demand real change to address. We've been talking about this issue for a while. We've been talking about how our policies and the way that we live has a negative impact on our environment. But we have not yet seen that kind of bold action and recognition from our leaders. That has to change. We also have to recognize how important it is that even as we take aggressive action to address this climate crisis in this country, that alone will not be enough. This is a problem that is facing our planet. It is facing every country in this world, and in order to tackle it, it will require us to build relationships based on cooperation, not conflict, with other countries in the world, and work together to address this crisis. Doing things like re-entering the Paris Accords is a necessary and important step, but that alone will not be enough. Retracting from the world and treating other countries in this zero-sum mentality where you're either with us or against us, with this approach of conflict rather than cooperation, must end. Because it I want to close by talking about an issue that is central to all of these others that are pressing and urgent and impact our everyday lives, and that is the issue of the cost of war. I am a major in the Army National Guard. Been serving now for almost 15 years. Deployed twice to the Middle East, where I served in a medical unit on that first deployment to Iraq in 2005, where I saw firsthand every day the high human cost of war and who pays the price. I saw it in friends of mine who were killed in combat, who never made that trip home with us. I see it in my brothers and sisters, our veterans, who continue to pay the price after coming home, dealing with wounds, both visible and invisible, the lack of quality care and benefits provided to them to help them when they come home. But the price for these wars that people don't often recognize is the one that every single one of us pays. The fact that we are spending trillions of dollars on wasteful regime change wars, on this new Cold War between the United States and nuclear-armed countries like Russia and China as tensions continue to increase. And this nuclear arms race that has been kicked off by actions like the one President Trump took recently in withdrawing from this historic INF treaty negotiated between Reagan and Gorbachev. These actions have put us as a country and the world in a position where we are at a greater risk of nuclear catastrophe than ever before in history. Now what's interesting is, as I share this information and talk about these issues with leaders in Washington, they say, really? Really? More than the Cuban Missile Crisis? More than the Cold War with the Soviet Union? Yes, the answer is yes. This is the reality of the threat, the existential threat we're facing today, and it should alarm every one of us here that leaders in Washington are either not paying attention, they don't know, or they don't care. This should alarm every one of us because that means not only are we not addressing this threat, but the actions that leaders in Washington are taking are actually making it worse. I want to get to why I bring this issue up and why it's important to every one of us. We in Hawaii had a huge wake-up call about a year ago when there was a text alert that went out to over 1 million phones all across our state that said, "Missile incoming, seek shelter immediately. This is not a drill." I want to let that sink in for a second. We all have phones in our pockets. Imagine that on a Saturday morning, like the one we are gathered here today, people in Hawaii were just waking up, maybe thinking about, maybe I'm going to go to the beach today or go hang out with my friends. When this message comes across their phones, think about what you would do and how you would feel, who you would think about, where you would go if you got that message as we're sitting here today, knowing that there are just minutes to live. It was terrifying. People thought about, where can I take my family? Where can I find shelter? Where can we be safe? The father was trying to figure out which of his children he would spend the last minutes of his life with. Another lowered his little girl, couldn't have been more than 8 years old, down a manhole, thinking that may be the only place where she could be safe. That alert turned out to be false, but the reason why we reacted the way that we did is because this threat is real. And it's important for us to recognize this, not because we should sit here and be afraid and think we are doomed, but because we have to recognize the power it lies in our hands to make sure this is not our future. Because it doesn't have to be this way. We have the power and we must take action to change direction, to bend this arc away from war and towards peace. To make sure that our foreign policy is one that actually serves the interests of our people, that secures our country and furthers us closer to peace rather than nuclear catastrophe and war. This is why I'm running for president. This is why I'm running for president, because none of you should have to go through what we went through in Hawaii. No family in this country should have to go through what our families went through in Hawaii. Not a single person in this country should have to live at any point in the day thinking about, what would I do if I got that message? We must change our foreign policy, the way we are relating to different countries, and build those relationships based on cooperation, not conflict, and work towards this future where we are getting rid of nuclear weapons rather than building more of them. Where we are taking those trillions of dollars being spent on wasteful regime change wars and a nuclear arms race, and taking those dollars and bringing them to serve the needs of people here at home. To make sure our kids have a great education and a great future. To invest in a green, renewable, energy-based economy that serves us today and for generations to come. To make sure that we're investing in the right kind of infrastructure and sustainable agriculture. There are so many things that we need to do right now to invest in a bright future for every single American. In order to do that, we have to change that course that we are on. Take those dollars, end those wasteful regime change wars, this nuclear arms race and new Cold War, and put those dollars, place our priorities where they need to be, which is right here on our people, on our families, and on our future. Now, in order to do that, this requires strong leadership. Leadership and all of us standing together, standing up against those in the military-industrial complex and those who have benefit and continue to push for these regime change wars and this nuclear arms race. The only thing that will overcome those powerful forces that have ruled over both parties in Washington for far too long are us, we the people. The people are the only ones who have the power to make this change. No one else is going to do it for us. We cannot forget or underestimate the power that we have in our own hands. And we cannot take lightly the threats that we face and the urgent need for us to stand up, speak out, and make sure that our voices are heard now. Not tomorrow, not next year, not in 5 years or 10 years, now. Our future is in our hands. I ask for your support. I ask you to stand with me so that we together can take these challenges on and shape this bright future for every single one of us. Thank you so much. Aloha. Thank you very much. Thank you all so much. We got time for, I've talked for way too long, apparently, so we're going to try to take a couple of questions and then hopefully have some time to be able to meet with you here. Yes, sir.
Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning.
Thank you for coming to my alma mater for this town hall. I'm Alan Long. I'm a elected California Democratic Party.
Thank you for your service. I am also military. Where can I ask where to go to OCS, or how'd you get here? All right, very cool.
During the recent 2 years, there's been a number of fires in California. cities like Santa Rosa and Paradise, California, causing a tremendous loss of life and lives. My soldiers and I were activated through those fires. I saw soldiers that made sacrifices that caused them to lose jobs and drop out of their semester in order to serve. How can you, as president, enable California to mitigate and prevent such disasters and prevent such tremendous loss of life and property?
Thank you very much for your service. Thank you for your leadership and your troops in responding and stepping up to serve the people of California during those times of disaster. I'm grateful to also serve an Army National Guard 4 times like that, where we can actually help and serve our neighbors and our friends during their time of greatest need. This is a problem that California has felt in such a deep and devastating way. But it speaks to a deeper issue that has impacted and continues to impact families and communities across this country as we deal with the climate crisis that we're facing and the ramifications of it. This is a problem that California alone can't solve. It's a problem that we need to tackle aggressively and strongly as a country because it is impacting us in different ways and it keeps getting worse. Like I mentioned before, this requires bold leadership, yes, at the federal level, yes, at the state level, yes, at the local level, and in every one of our lives, but also recognizing that this requires a global response to a global crisis. Right now, the leadership in this country is not doing enough to build those partnerships and relationships with other countries to see how we can take that kind of necessary action. That's what I will change, and that's the kind of leadership that I'll bring to the White House as your President and Commander-in-Chief.
Thank you for being here. I work here at the wastewater plant in the city, and throughout the nation, the infrastructure is crumbling, the bridges, the water, wastewater. As a president, what would you do different to make sure our infrastructure gets the better grade? Right now, it gets fail grade.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. You know, in my home state of Hawaii, if you couldn't hear in the back, the question was about our crumbling infrastructure. He works in the wastewater programs here in the city and the woefully lacking resources to address our failing infrastructure. What's happening here is unfortunately a challenge and a problem that every community across the country is facing. The Army Corps of Engineers in my home state of Hawaii alone put an estimate at the infrastructure needs in our little state at over $1 billion. So multiply that by communities across this country, in places here in San Francisco, in places like Flint, Michigan, where people are being poisoned and sick because of their failed infrastructure and polluted water. These are things that are happening all across this country, and people's voices are not being heard about how our failing infrastructure is directly impacting our health and well-being. Passing a big infrastructure bill, making those investments should be something that is a bipartisan concern because it impacts every community in this country. Now, if you look at people in Washington say, well, look, there's just not enough money. There's just not enough money to make sure that people have clean water to drink. There's just not enough money to make sure that our roads are safe to drive on, that our bridges are not going to fail us. There's just not enough money. But these are the very same people who continue to vote for and to advocate for spending trillions of dollars on wasteful regime change wars or nuclear weapons that make us less safe, that increase suffering in the people in the countries where we wage these wars, that strengthen terrorist groups like ISIS and Al-Qaeda, undermining our own national security, what to speak of the cost that is borne by our men and women in uniform. So you asked what I will change. I will change our priorities in this country and set them right so we stop wasting trillions of all of our dollars on these wasteful, counterproductive wars and dedicate them to rebuilding our infrastructure, to taking care of these urgent needs that we have in communities all across this country. You will hear a lot of empty promises from politicians about all of the great things that they want to do for you. But unless you have someone in the White House who has that courage and that experience and leadership to bring about that change so that we are taking those trillions of dollars and bringing them here, then those promises will remain empty and unfulfilled. That's the change that I'm bringing and that I'm offering to you. Thank you.
I just wanted to say that I'm so grateful to have the opportunity here to speak in person. Thank you. I know.
Let me hand you this so people can hear you.
Thank you. I just want to say I'm so thankful to have the opportunity to hear you speak in person. I know you from the 2016 primary when Bernie Sanders ran for president. Listening to you today, I feel like you have very similar beliefs and principles in terms of how you see turning this country around. And I'm so grateful because I believe it is unity between people who care about this country will make a difference. I just want to give you an opportunity to speak about how you feel, what separates you from Bernie Sanders, since you're both running this time.
Yeah.
And second, I have a second question also, and that is, I understand you practice the faith of Hinduism, and I'm wondering how that affects how you work as a politician and how it affects your decision making.
Thank you. Bernie remains a good friend, and I think he brings such an important voice to this country and the conversations that we're having. My decision to run for president was really based on that recognition that the most important job that a president has is as commander-in-chief. So the experiences that I have of serving as a soldier for almost 15 years, of being deployed to the Middle East and seeing and experiencing firsthand the cost of war and the consequences of the failed policies of this country directly, firsthand. I am not someone who is going to go into the White House and sit back and rely on the foreign policy establishment in Washington to tell me what to do. I don't have to. That is what differentiates me from every other candidate who's running for president right now, is because I'm walking in on day one with that experience, both as a soldier directly, but also as a member of Congress who served on the Armed Services and Foreign Affairs committees for years, who's engaged with leaders of other countries, who's held the feet to the fire of people like the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. I'm not intimidated by the stars that someone wears on their shoulders. I'm not intimidated by the military-industrial complex and what their missions are. I'm not running for president to be president. I'm running for president to be able to bring about this sea change in our foreign policy that is so necessary for us and for the world. One last question, really quick. I want to briefly answer. I'm a practicing Hindu. I practice Bhakti Yoga and Karma Yoga. Dedicating my life to do my best every day, to be of service to God and to be of service to others. That pretty much sums up my spiritual foundation and my motivation throughout my life. Thank you.
Hello, ma'am.
What's your name?
Anika.
Nice to meet you.
So I'm only 15. This is the first presidential campaign I'm ever being involved with.
Awesome.
I know that you're only in your 30s, and I think it's really endearing that you're running at such a young age. And as the potential youngest president of the United States in the history of this country, what do you plan on catering to the younger citizens of America?
Good question. what matters most to what I bring to the White House and the presidency is the experience and the perspective that I bring. In 2020, millennials will be the largest demographic of any, and the first time that millennials will actually be that majority demographic to determine what kind of future we want for ourselves. It's important, to me, this is not about well, I'm gonna cater to quote unquote young people or this group or that group or that group. The message that I have shared with you today about why I'm running and the kind of change that I seek to bring about is the kind of change that serves every person in this country. Not just one group or another, not one age or another, one race or another, one religion or another. This is about every single one. And the key to that, rather than pandering to one group or another, the kind of change that we're talking about is centered around putting people first, putting people ahead of profits, putting people ahead of politics, putting people ahead of the powerful, really working and centering our policies around how does this best serve the people of this country and our planet. That's my goal, that's my objective. Thank you all so much. Sorry to interrupt your time. Thank you all for being here. Thank you.
I thought she was brilliant, actually. She covered critical domestic issues, Medicare for all, environmental issues, but at the end of her talk, she talked about the real reason she's running is to stop the regime change wars, stop wasting trillions of dollars invading, intervening, and trying to overthrow governments around the world, bring that money home instead of wasting it abroad. Our own infrastructure needs support, our own people need support, and there needs to be a dramatic change in U.S. foreign policy. That's why she's running.
I've been following Tulsi for a while. I think she is just fantastic, and I thought that she handled the questions today so well, and I'm mostly amazed by her willingness to take on the military-industrial complex and the incredible waste and incredible suffering that it's been creating. She's the only candidate who's willing to do that and has the energy to do that and the experience to do that. And that makes her by far the best qualified candidate of the field that's running right now. So I'm hoping to see Tulsi just blow them all away.
Aloha.
Aloha. Nice to see you. I like your bag.
Way back when I was serving in the office of the Secretary of Defense, we didn't wear our uniforms, so I was over in the Congress in civilian clothes and saw what really went on. And I was so frustrated, I went over to the steps of the Supreme Court and meditated. And the answer came through loud and clear as to what can solve this problem. And the answer was the people. Simple, easy. If the people don't act and change, why, nothing else is going to change. And so that's what got me to develop my little program that goes on Home Street USA, which was the basis for the Russian program we last talked about. And just to try and get people together and solve local problems, because then they'll see they're not demons, and now they can start working together to solve state and national problems. So when she said the people, boom, I said, yeah, she's right on.
Happy to send them to you.
I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you so much.
But Sharon also knows how to get all the time. Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Great.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you both so much. Thank you.
That was a wonderful event.
Thank you.
Do it
Really
again.
appreciate it. Absolutely.
This must be exhausting to keep going through the same stuff.
This is the first time we're doing this.
I mean, just even this morning.